Vanguard Zero has been out globally for exactly a year today. And I wanted to just go ahead and go back and look over the year that's passed since it's been pretty special to me this entire year. I've always been like mildly into Cardfight Vanguard, but I've never actually fully committed. I remember specifically when the anime aired on Crunchyroll. I was with one of my high school friends who I used to play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh with. So we both sat down and we watched the anime, the first episode, and I remember I was specifically pretty into it. I just didn't really understand the rules or like how this would work like as a series, and I kept sort of comparing it to like how the Yu-Gi-Oh anime works. But more importantly, my friend, he really wasn't into it pretty much at all. He was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Which means that even if I wanted to get into it, I would be getting into it alone at this rate, since I was kind of hoping that I could, get into this new thing with him. But without him, I kind of just gave up on Vanguard at that point. Eventually, I ended up rewatching the first episode and kept watching the rest of the anime. It kind of started out as just something that I kind of had in the background while I was like doing homework or pretending to do homework, stuff like that. And then eventually I just ended up not doing any homework because I just really enjoyed watching the anime and I was having a really good time, watching what was going on. But I still didn't really ever get to play the card game at this point. I kind of remained loyal to Yu-Gi-Oh at this point. Even though I wasn't really playing Yu-Gi-Oh at all, I just kind of caught up with it from time to time, sometimes watch the anime, stuff like that. It wasn't until like Duel Links came out that I actually started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess maybe competitively or seriously or whatever you may want to call it. Because I played a lot of Duel Links and I spent a lot of time and money on Duel Links. So much so that even though I initially hated the game, I ended up loving it and I was streaming it and, I made YouTube videos about it and all that stuff. But thankfully Vanguard Zero came at the perfect time because I was burnt out and I needed to scratch that mobile card game itch. So the game actually released April 9th, 2020. I remember I saw a post on Twitter about the game coming out and I bookmarked it and I was like, all right, I'm going to get this game. I'm going to get into Vanguard finally, etc., etc. But I completely forgot about it once the day actually came. I didn't actually remember until, for some reason, I started receiving recommendations for different fight videos of him covering Zero on my feed. I was like, oh right, that's coming out. So I started watching all of his videos and then I immediately downloaded the game. Once I went through the tutorial, I was a little confused because it was kind of different from what I remembered in the anime, and that's kind of when I realized that similar to Duel Links, this game plays on a different sort of format or rule set than the original game, which didn't really affect me much since all my experience playing Vanguard was just from watching the anime. I picked up Zero pretty quickly and pretty easily. It was pretty addicting. What really got me about it was the crafting system. See, in Duel Links, what I spent most of my time doing was actually grinding up characters in order to get gems and some cards and stuff, or get the gems then buy cards, and that's basically all I spent my time doing, and that got really boring really quickly, and I also didn't get a lot out of it. Whereas here in Zero, instead of doing the quick duels, or not quick duels, the auto duels, I would instead be able to do the character fights here and get materials for any card I want. Clan specific, but I can get any card I want. It's not, specific cards that the game lets you craft that are completely not great, but literally any card. I don't have to touch the gacha at all if I don't want to. And they also add quick fights, which means I could go through all of my grinding in a second, right? On top of that, because of the quick fights, I was actually able to play ranked for once. This is something that I really avoided in Duel Links, but kind of since I was just getting through the story and because the character fights were, quick fights, kind of didn't have any choice but to play ranked, and ranked was actually pretty fun. I've always liked the way Vanguard has this sort of game balance where you can't really, like in Yu-Gi-Oh, get OTK'd in one turn because you have to ride to your grade 1 grade 2 and grade 3, and it's not until pretty much your grade 3 where you can actually try and win the game for the most part. So there's at least some time for you to play the game. You know, you can have the worst deck in the world versus the best deck in the world, and you can still kind of play the game for a little bit. But anyways, I think I'll stop complaining to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Duel Links at this point. Then, after about a month, we actually got more support in the form of a new banner. In the Japanese version of the game, which is, I believe, 3 months ahead of the global version, they had a set 2 and a set 3 release. We, in global, got set 2 and 3 smushed together into one, which is kind of interesting. It kind of makes sense, because initially we only had the 4 clans and then the 1 clan event, so there wasn't really too much variety going around. So I understand why they kind of want to give you a bunch of cards initially so you don't lose faith in the game right from the get-go. But it would have been kind of interesting to see in terms of global and me playing and experiencing how sort of the meta and everything would have been like if set 2 and 3 had some breathing room in between them. But anyways, none of that matters. Set 2 and 3 gave us a whole bunch of support for all the existing clans, which were, you know, Royal Paladins, Nova, Grappler, Kagero, and Oracle Think Tank. But in addition to that, we got support for 4 new clans. So we got support for Dimension Police, Dark Irregulars, Bermuda Triangle, and Pale Moon. Anyways, so I wailed super hard for this set because I really wanted to get a lot of the Dimension Police cards. I got a good friend of mine, Pablo Box, into Vanguard, specifically because I showed him the, I guess like an AMV, well, not an AMV, just a clip of when Kyote Superior rides into Great Dayusha against Ren. And we were like super hyped for it because like, shit, giant robot, fuck yeah, and all that jazz. And I really wanted to play Dayusha and stuff. But, you know, first wave of Dayusha was kind of whatever. At least for me, I wasn't super into it. I didn't play too much Dimension Police. And I don't think I got anything for Dark Irregulars much. But I did get a bunch of Bermuda Triangle and Pale Moon stuff. I ended up using Bermuda Triangle a little bit in the beginning of the season, just because, you know, it's Bermuda Triangle. I always remember watching them in the anime and being like, what the heck is going on? This looks really different, because just they look like, you know, normal people. And I was more used to like other card games where it's just more like fantasy and whatnot, but they just look like straight up fucking people. But I always joke to myself like, oh man, if I ever get into Vanguard, that's the cards I'll use, because, you know, lols, big titty mermaids or whatever. But instead I played a whole butt ton of Pale Moon, and I really loved that clan. And I spent a lot of time grinding through ranked with them. And I managed to find my favorite unit so far in Crimson Beast Tamer. Set 4 came out next, and boy howdy, this one was quite the big one. We got Shadow Paladins, which when they came out, even though they only had the 1 wave of support, they were ridiculously good. But more importantly, it's the set that gave us Majesty Lord Blaster, or MLB, as he's more colloquially known. Initially, I really wanted to get it because I kept hearing about how crazy strong it was. At this point, I had become a Different Fight mega fan, so I was watching all of his videos as soon as they came out, and I was constantly hearing about how great MLB was in the Japanese server, as was everyone else, because as soon as this dropped, everyone started using Majesty Lord Blaster. Except for me, for the most part, because I only managed to pull 1 copy of him. Instead, I managed to pull 4 copies of Dote, or Gigantic Overlord, the End. And I'm not really a big fan of Kagero, but I tried playing the deck since I had it, and I just did not like it. In addition to that, I got like 6 copies of Scarlet Witch Coco for some reason, and because of that, I ended up really hating this card so much, because every time I would open for this set, I was hoping to get MLB or something like that. Instead, it was Scarlet Witch Coco. And so later on in the future, I went on to be like, man, darn that Scarlet Witch Coco, she sucks. Only to immediately get met with a bunch of pushback about a bunch of guys that apparently run Coco decks, and it's their favorite deck, and they use it a lot, and all this stuff. But anyways, during this set, we also got support in global for Bushi-backed tournaments. What this means is that you, as a local community member, can actually host your own tournament. And in addition to hosting the tournament, you can actually get backed by Bushiroad/Game Studio if you provide them with the necessary documents, and they'll actually reward the organizer as well as some of the winners of the tournament with in-game packs if you manage to get enough people into your tournament, which I thought was really awesome. So awesome that my friend Pablo and I actually decided to host our own tournament. And this tournament went surprisingly well. So at this point, I'd actually been streaming Vanguard Zero over on Twitch, and I wasn't like super popular or anything like that. And Pablo wasn't really streaming or making YouTube videos or anything like that, really. We were just kind of shit talking on Twitter for the most part, but we actually managed to pull about 40 people, which was really impressive. I ended up actually streaming the entirety of the tournament, since you need to provide, I think it's like, you have to provide specifically one match of each round to Bushiroad/Game Studio in order for them to legitimately consider it a legitimate tournament and actually give you the packs. So I ended up streaming the entire thing, which, man, that was really something. The tournament started at about 2 p.m. and ended at about 11 p.m. due to a combination of all of the participants and the fact that for some reason Pablo and I thought that we needed judges for each match. So me and him and 2 other people would actually go into the matches at the time and actually watch them, make sure everything was, kosher, which made no sense considering that the game already kind of does that for you, and it's kind of more or less impossible to cheat in those circumstances. And everyone was, relatively cool about reporting the reports correctly. But yeah, I pulled out all the stops for that one because I ended up helping organize it, making sure everyone got their matches. I was streaming it. I was also casting all of the matches, doing play-by-plays, and then I also participated in the tournament, which doesn't really mean much because I ended up losing in the first round. But all of that on top of the fact that a lot of the participants were actually from, parts of Latin America, so I had to do a lot of this stuff in my broken Spanish. That was a real that was a real adventure, to say the least. Nonetheless, I ended up losing in the first round. I actually lost to the winner of the tournament, who went on and won the whole thing, with Pablo actually being in second place. So that was also really cool. Other than that, the game actually started to be a little bit miserable. With the new support, I was having a lot of trouble actually playing Pale Moon with the base set of support that we've got. And, I wasn't really having a great time playing with MLB. I actually ended up playing Nova Grapplers around this time, because there's some cards that were released in set 2 and 3 that are called Risers, which I thought looked really cool. They look like actual, robots. So I worked really hard and I got, perfect Risers, and I built a deck and I had a lot of fun with that. Unfortunately, I got it a little bit late because it was kind of the best deck to come out of sets 2 and 3. But once MLB came out, it was kind of like, iffy. But I ended up playing that deck, and I tried all the stops against MLB. I had, Boomerang Man, which is a card that lets you attack the back row, so I can snipe one of their key cards, which was Wingo Brave. I would not attack at certain points just to let them not get counterblast to be able to do stuff, all this kind of stuff. All of it, and it's kind of annoying, but I actually managed to make it all the way to Legend 40 this month. Which is the highest legend I've ever made to the date. Around set 5, I was starting to get a little bit burnt out because I've been playing the game pretty much religiously at this point. And, between struggling with MLB and beating myself up for losing in the tournament and all that kind of stuff, I was kind of hoping something new would come out of the game. We got a couple of clan events at this point, and a couple of other events, but they weren't really anything special, and I kind of realized that it's all kind of the same event, just slightly reskinned, and the base events weren't great to begin with, so to get the same thing over and over again was kind of lame. Really needed some new sort of spice for the game. And set 5 kind of gave us that. We got a bunch of new clans. In addition to a new mechanic that all these clans centered around, we got the limit break support. first. So we got new clans in Gold Paladins, Narukami, Great Nature, and Angel Feather, which is really cool. I didn't really care too much for Gold Paladins or Narukami at the start. I was more interested in Great Nature specifically, and somewhat Angel Feather. But unfortunately, I pulled, I think, nothing for Angel Feathers. I just got like one of the triple rares multiple times. Consecutively, just one card, which wasn't really, doing much for me. And I managed to get most of just about everything for Great Nature, but when I actually played the deck, I didn't really have a good time. I actually finished building the deck on some Saturday, and then entered a tournament that Pablo was also in, and he invited me to take part in, using this deck that I just built. And I maybe did like 1 or 2 ranked matches in between waiting for the tournament to start. It was, I believe the format is Swiss, where it's basically you face multiple people in different rounds, and whoever accumulates the most points moves on to a sort of winner's bracket. I did horrible. I lost all of my matches, and I remember specifically doing all kinds of misplays. I won, I think, once, and it was only because my opponent no-showed. So that was pretty bad. In general, I didn't really like how Great Nature played with this first wave of support, so I was kind of underwhelmed. I ended up actually using Gold Paladins instead, even though I initially kind of didn't care about them. I did manage to pull a bunch of the key cards, so I actually managed to use the deck, and it was actually working out pretty well. But then we got set 6, which gave us support for a couple of the older clans. So we got support for Oracle Think Tank, Nova Grappler, Dark Irregulars, and Pale Moon. The Oracle Think Tank stuff was actually really cool. I originally wanted to play Oracle Think Tank back in set 2/3 because we got these set of cards called Tsukiyomi. And in general, for the whole clan, their whole sort of gimmick or premise is trying to divine the top cards of your deck and, figuring out what you're going to draw next or what you're going to check next. And whenever I saw that in the anime, I thought that was super cool, and that was more seriously the deck that I really wanted to play, just because I had always had a really good memory. Even specifically, I remember growing up playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I would kind of, in my head, I would think about what was left in my deck, card for card, and thinking what would be like, what are the chances that I'll draw this card, or how long I would have to stall out to maybe be able to draw this card, and etc, etc. But for some reason, I have the worst luck when it comes to Misaki's stuff, because I didn't really pull any of the Tsukiyomi stuff. And then in this wave, which was for Battle Sisters, I didn't really get any of that stuff either. I only got some of it. But none of that matters, because I managed to actually get a bunch of Pale Moon stuff. Really liked using Pale Moon before, but they kind of fell off a little bit with everything kind of getting a lot more power. But now we actually had the power of Limit Break in Pale Moon, and man, I love this deck. It's usually pretty hard for me in these kinds of games to say I really love some sort of deck or anything like that, because usually I'm pretty picky when it comes to aesthetics and whatnot, and usually when I find a deck that I like, they don't end up being very good in the game, or I don't really end up having fun with them. But for some God-given reason, Pale Moon just checked off all 3 of those boxes, and we, hit the ground running with that. I eventually realized I only had one Dreamy Fortress, which is a somewhat important card. I ended up, I believe, crafting one more after this, so I had 2 at this point. And then I started working my way up to crafting the other 2 at this point. In addition to this new set, we also got some new nerfs. I think we also got a couple of buffs, but more importantly, above all else, we actually got a nerf to Wingull Brave, which was a pretty pivotal card for MLB. Granted, it didn't really hurt the deck too much. The deck was still really good, but it definitely slowed it down a little bit. Since it was called Wingull Brave and he was gone, Pablo actually organized another tournament called the Wingull Wingon tournament. I ended up streaming and casting this one as well, but it was single elimination, no judges, none of that stuff. We kind of learned from our mistakes from last time. But I actually ended up losing this tournament in the first round, or it might have been the second round. One of those two. Specifically because I decked out. And I remember being so upset about it, because I'm pretty sure I could have at least tried to win that turn. But what ended up happening is I attacked with Lukier for game, and I did my drive check, and I got a draw trigger, which ended up drawing me the last card in my deck, and I lost. In Vanguard, as soon as you have no cards remaining in your deck, you lose. No matter what point of the game it is, if you remove the last card from your deck, you lose. So I lost. I was pretty devastated by this, because not only did I lose, the other tournament, I gave myself a little bit of an excuse, like, oh, well, I lost to the guy who won the tournament, so, that's kind of whatever. And I did really good in, rank that season. Then I lost the other tournament, but I was like, well, I was kind of using this deck that I've never used before, excuses. But now this time, I didn't really have much of an excuse. Even though, I did lose by deck out, I still lost, and I was still kind of putting it all my all. So I felt kind of down. At this point, I had actually started streaming the game pretty regularly, sometimes even 3 times a week. And I was actually making some friends with some of the people in the community that were also streaming over on Twitch. Specifically, someone named Juan Mango64. Juan Mango is a really cool guy. If you haven't checked him out yet on Twitch, you should. He has this really cool club aesthetic, and in general, he's like a really chill guy. Except for that time that he burned down his club for insurance money. But anyways, we don't talk about that here. Anyways, he showed up to one of my streams to remind me that he had a tournament coming up. He had actually sent me an invite, and I just completely forgot to actually enter the tournament. Thankfully, he did come by and remind me, because I managed to enter 63rd out of 64, because he was going to cap it at 64, so I was the second to last person to enter. A couple people entered and dropped out, and then eventually Pablo was actually able to enter the tournament as well, which is really cool. And this was going to be a pretty serious tournament. It was the Juan Mango Invitational Birthday Tournament. We have a big one coming up here. This might actually end up being a tournament arc, but basically, it was a huge tournament with 64 competitors. It was going to be live streamed. They had actual casters. There was a bunch of organizers. There was actually prize money. The whole shebang. But it wasn't actually until next month, which was actually Juan's birthday. So I had about a month or so, maybe a little less than that, to actually finish and prepare my decks. This tournament was going to use a 2-deck format. So what that means basically is you enter in with 2 decks, and when you face your opponent, you have to win 2 out of 3. As soon as you win with one of your decks, you can't use that deck anymore, because you have to win with both of your decks. I was still trying to figure out what decks I was going to bring in, but I more importantly wanted to finish up my Pale Moon deck. As I mentioned before, I only had 2 Dreaming Fortresses, and there was no way I was going to have enough time to craft the last 2. So instead, I kind of just gathered up all my gems and gacha tickets at this point, and just gave a prayer out to the Vanguard gods, the gacha gods, and actually hit the gacha. And lo and behold, I actually got another copy of Dreaming Fortress, along with another triple rare, which was actually a copy of Lukier, which I already had 4 copies of. But it actually gave me materials to craft my last copy of Dreaming Fortress. So I actually had my Dreaming Fortress Lukier super awesome deck built and ready to go. Since the tournament was actually next month, it meant that a whole new set was actually going to release right before the tournament, which was kind of odd. Set 7. And it was in December. December was crazy packed with events, so this is actually going to be a long one, so sit tight. But Set 7 gave us support for quite a lot of things. It gave us support for Dimension Police. It gave us support for Angel Feather, Great Nature, and a brand new clan in Aquaforce. Just about everyone was actually waiting for this set to drop to submit their decks for the tournament, because they all wanted to play with Aquaforce. Aquaforce was, coming down the pipe. It seemed like a really good deck, and a lot of people wanted to play it. Me and Pablo were excited about this set because this was the set that Great Dayusha came out in. Of course, I did not get Great even though I hit the gacha quite a lot. So instead of going in with Dimension Police and Pale Moon, which I was kind of hoping for, I ended up actually going with either Risers or Gold Paladins to support my Pale Moon deck. Because I knew Pale Moon was great, I love Pale Moon, and I knew it would be the nice ink, but I needed something to accompanying it. And I figured, since Pale Moon was somewhat defensive, a more aggressive deck like Risers or my Azel build would work out pretty well. In the end, I ended up going with Azel because I figured since I'm running 9 crits at that deck, it can be pretty sacky and it can give me a lot of like cheap wins. And if worst comes to worst, Pale Moon can just clean up and give me the win for that round. So I went in and I submitted both of my decks, my Azel deck and my Pale Moon deck. Took a look at the deck list, and as I expected, a bunch of people were playing MLB and Aquaforce. Mostly, I think, a combination of the two. I wasn't really a fan of Aquaforce. Ironically, the Vanguard has this weird thing where, like, if I ever say, oh, I don't like this, they hear the opposite, and in the gacha, they're like, oh, is that true? Here are all these cards that you don't like. Because I actually managed to pull, I think, 3 copies of Maelstrom, which was one of the triple rares for Aquaforce, and then I had enough material to craft, you know, the 4th one. So I actually had most of the deck built from day 1. Unfortunately, because I didn't really want to play the deck. I just didn't really like Leon, the character that uses the deck in the anime, because he was just kind of like a jerk, which was kind of the point, because he was kind of like a bad guy in the beginning. But then, I don't know, it just... Maelstrom kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because he just has all like these effects, and I always felt like, you know, it was just like some 10-year-old. It always felt like I was playing against some 10-year-old, right, that was using Aquaforce, and I'm like beating them up, and then they throw out their Maelstrom, and they're like, oh, I attack with our monster. By the way, he gets a boost in attack. By the way, he gets another boost in attack. By the way, he draws a card. And, by the way, he retires one of your cards too. So it just felt like a bunch of random good effects just slapped onto this one card, and it just felt really weird. Anyways, after a couple of days' time, it was tournament time. I actually showed up to the tournament late because I completely lost track of time. I think the tournament started like a different time, or like there was a time zone. I don't know what was going on. But like some sort of anime main character, I showed up super late. Pablo actually managed to send me a message like, hey, where the hell are you? They're like calling you because your match is starting. I'm like, oh crap. So I ran, not actually because I was, you know, just sitting down, but I ran to go to Discord and get into my match. I originally wanted to try and record this tournament just to have footage and then make a video talking about my experience on YouTube going through the tournament. But since I was late, I didn't really have time to set anything up, and I was just like, fuck it, just play the game. I actually ended up highly regretting that in the long run. But anyways, I barely managed to make it to my match. My opponent was waiting for me. I was like a couple of minutes away from getting disqualified. From what I remember, my opponent had Spike Burrows and Great Nature, and I think they beat my Gold Paladins first. But then I eventually managed to beat them again with golds, using against a Great Nature, and in the end I beat them with Pale Moon, managing to finally advance to the next round. And it was at this point that I realized something interesting. Must have been something to do with the fact that we both joined at the same time, but Pablo was actually in a bracket right near mine. And when I looked at the bracket, I noticed that if I were to win 2 games and make it to round 4, and Pablo was going to win his next 2 games, given that he had already won the first round also, we were actually going to face off against each other. Pablo and I had obviously played a lot against each other before the tournament, and I pretty much always came out on the bottom. Pablo pretty much beat me every time. I maybe beat him a couple of times out of like some fluke wins or like some actual wins or anything like that, but nothing decisive or like a set or anything like that where I actually came out on top, right? But I saw that and I was like, great, this is an opportunity to actually prove myself against him and actually win for once, and in a tournament. And I was like, I'm gonna make this anime moment happen. Whether it kills me or not, I'm gonna make it happen. So I went into my next match against a player that had both Spike Bros and Shadow Paladins. They, similar to last time, ended up beating my golds with their Spike Bros. Seems I have a bad matchup against that. And then afterwards, I ended up beating their shadows with my golds. I think I got like a really lucky crit at the end or something like that. So I managed to win to tie up the game 1-1. Up until this point, in ranked and everything like that, I had always spent so much time just like sitting around praying for a trigger, and then, you know, hoping my opponent disconnected, or hoping they were a VP farmer, or that they made a stupid play, or that, you know, I would just win and get an easy win or something like that. And I was always doing that constantly throughout matches. But somewhere before this, before the tournament, I sort of started to realize that, you know, that's not really the best way to go about this. If you want to win, you should probably have a better mindset about that. So, I don't know what it was about this specific match. It was probably, you know, the adrenaline and me trying to like match up with Pablo, but I just, you know, got into that right mindset for once, and I was, you know, doing everything, playing correctly, not just sitting around and like closing my eyes and praying for the heal trigger or anything like that. I was just having faith in my cards. But it didn't matter. I ended up actually losing the match and getting knocked into the losers bracket. I was pretty disappointed about that, but Pablo actually ended up losing his match also. I think he made it to the next one, round 3, but then he also lost and went down to losers bracket. So now that I was in the losers bracket, I was kind of disappointed, but I was also one game away from losing. So I really wanted to, you know, still prove myself. And I ended up playing against my next opponent in losers bracket. I don't remember what deck they used first, but I remember getting a easy win with the Gold Paladins and be like, yes, all right, we got this. Then next up, it was a match against their Kagero and my Pale Moon. And I remember this one specifically because they ended up writing Blockade at some point, which completely shuts down the dreamy defense that I've been building up this entire time. Not to mention, it was just kind of one of those weird games where, you know, you weren't getting triggers, your opponent was getting all triggers, they were getting healed, all this kind of like weird stuff. And I believe they had like some weird set where they were playing like crits and stuff, and I was just like really, you know, out of my element here, and I was just like, I'm really about to lose this and then, you know, get out of the tournament and whatnot, even though I was one win ahead. But I managed to eventually get my head straight and actually win 2-0 there, but I almost got taken out of the tournament by a Blockade deck. After this, I just went on an absolute tear through the losers bracket. I came in at losers round 2, and I made it all the way to like losers round 6 at some point. And I was just getting win after win after win after win. I was doing really good. Then once I finally got up to losers round 6, things are a little bit more interesting. As I mentioned, the tournament was being streamed. And now that I was finally making my way up there, this next match was actually going to be on stream, which was really cool. It was actually streamer versus streamer, because it was me, who is a streamer, versus my opponent, Wolf the Legend, who is also a streamer. And he was using something, I don't remember what it was, but I remember that at the end of it, it was a decisive match with his Great Nature deck and my Pale Moon deck. He was, I remember specifically the casters also mentioning it, but he was using Locks, which is some sort of elephant looking card that's part of Great Nature. That really isn't too great, most people would say. I originally thought he was pretty cool because he has a really cool effect that you don't really see on any other card in the game, but in general he's not really too great. So running it in general was kind of questionable, but I went ahead, I attacked with my Lucier. I actually hit a stand trigger because this entire time I was playing 7 draw, 2 stands, because of that one time I decked out on a tournament and learned, and I started putting in those 2 stands to make sure I don't deck out. I got the stand trigger there, which was huge because I managed to stand one of my columns on the right side, which was a turquoise beast hammer. So I swung in, I think I hit a PG and I swung in for game, and I was, you know, fist pumping. I'm like, yes, I won on stream, I'm going to the next round. No, they actually 6 damaged heal, and it was of course the locks that they put as their heal, and I was just like, oh man, shouldn't talk shit about this elephant. After that, it was my opponent's turn. I didn't have any defenses. I don't remember what specifically I had on the field other than what I mentioned, but it was basically like, well, alright, I'm done. I maybe had like a PG or an intercept or something like that, and I was like, alright, well, this sucks. But I knew that I only had but so many cards left in my deck, and I know I still had some heals left. So as he swung in for game, I was pretty confident I was going to hit the heal, and I did. I hit the 6 damage heal, so we were still alive. Unfortunately, they had hit, I believe, a draw trigger or stand trigger before that, so they had another column that could swing in for game. But none of that mattered, because I managed to hit a double heal, which was freaking crazy. On stream specifically, in a tournament, in one of the somewhat final rounds, I managed to hit a double heal, which was really cool. So I tried to ride this momentum on into the next round, which for some reason, you know, there was some sort of weird mix-up at the time, because this match was supposed to also be on stream, even though I was just on stream. I guess because of the way, you know, the loser bracket was closing up. But then we did the first match, or the first match, or the first game of that match off screen. I just got washed out by MLB, and then we did the next 2 games on stream. I went in with golds, and I think I got some win. It was 1-1, and then I had to go against their Narukami with my Pale Moon deck. Up until now, you know, Narukami was a very interesting deck because it kind of focused on retiring your intercepts and negating their intercepts and doing all that kind of stuff to your intercepts. And, you know, my dreamy defense and all that kind of stuff kind of relied on my intercepts and playing a little bit defensively. So typically, you would think this deck was a bad matchup for me, but for the most part, when I played them in ranked, I felt the matchup was about 50-50. I didn't feel like they had a massive advantage over me, but I'm not going to say something like it was in my favor either, because they obviously had their strengths against me. But unfortunately, it didn't matter because I actually ended up losing. And since it was loser's bracket, I was done and out for. Lost with some Steven guy. Even though I lost, I had a pretty amazing run. I was really proud of myself. And I actually managed to place 7th, which was really cool. Because, you know, never really played the game, Vanguard much before, kind of just this new person. I managed to use Pale Moon, which not a lot of people were using. Everyone was kind of just using MLB, Kagero, Aquaforce, you know, the whole shebang, Shadow Powers, all that stuff. I managed to use the decks that I wanted to use, and I managed to make it pretty far, you know. Out of 64 people to place 7th, you know, I was pretty proud of myself for once. But we're actually not done with tournaments yet. Sometime after this, Pablo actually asked me to be part of a tag team tournament. It was a tournament where basically, similar to the anime, it was teams of 3, and you would compete with each other to see which team was superior. So far, the team was myself, who just placed 7th, and was feeling great about myself. Pablo, who placed 2nd in the tournament that we hosted before, and then the winner of that tournament, who actually placed 1st. So I was thinking like, damn, this is a pretty stacked team. We should have a pretty good shot at this. Unfortunately, we did not. We actually ended up losing in the first round. Pablo actually managed to win. It was a really awesome game win for him. I have it on YouTube, the video of it. And I specifically used the thumbnail of Kyote beating Ren, but then his 2 teammates lost, which means even though he had a great victory, him and his team actually ended up losing. It was exactly what happened there. I ended up losing. My opponent ended up playing, you guessed it, Blockade, and I actually lost the Blockade this time. I couldn't do a damn thing. I lost so badly that I actually got memed on in the tournament Discord. And then unfortunately the next player, the guy that won the tournament, our tournament, he actually ended up losing also. So we're actually done and out of that tournament. And this kind of sucked Because, you know, I was like up here after my top 8 win, and I was like, alright, not half bad. This kind of knocked me down quite a lot of pegs. Especially losing to Blockade, which was kind of humiliating and all that stuff. I had thought I put all that like loss and all that stuff behind me, but this one kind of hurt me, and I was just like, oh man, that blows. Like, my ego skyrocketed and was immediately shot down. But towards the end of the month, Juan Mango actually did this big collaboration with a bunch of other Vanguard streamers and content creators, and it was a pretty awesome event. You got a lot of pretty big names. You got Living Proof, 50 Cards, the man, the myth, the legend, my role model, Different Fight, as well, to play Among Us. And for some reason I was there also, which was pretty cool. I can't thank Juan enough for inviting me, even though I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, because everyone was like, oh yeah, this guy, and they all kind of knew each other, and I was just kind of like the new awkward kid in the corner there. But that was a lot of fun. It made me feel like, for once, I was actually part of something, part of a community, even though I wasn't like, you know, super well known or whatever the heck. But yeah, some people still knew about me, and it wasn't so much the fame or whatever, not that I really had any, but it was just the fact of being part of like a community, having like people that, you know, I can go on Twitch and see a couple of people streaming, like, hey, you know, I know this person, let's go talk to this person, let's watch this stream, you know, they'll come to my stream, all that kind of stuff. It was nice to have that kind of community. Go on to like YouTube, see their videos, go on to Twitter, talk to them on Twitter about the game, all this kind of stuff. All of that was really awesome. I never really had any of that sort of sense of community in any of the other sort of games that I've played. When I did, the community just was not very inviting and welcoming. Unlike Vanguard, which was just, you know, with open arms, I felt welcomed in. Set 8 was kind of a weird one for me, since I was kind of having sort of on and off relationship with ranked at this point, and set 8 didn't really sway me in any good direction. This time around, we got some more support for Oracle Think Tank, more support for Gold Paladins, Narukami, and Aquaforce. You know, I hated Aquaforce before, but this new one was even worse. Because, you know, as I mentioned before, it was this mentality of like this little kid just getting a bunch of good effects. Well, now, Glory Maelstrom, it had this effect where it was able to attack you with 2 crits, which means it does 2 damage. But if you don't happen to have a grade 3 in hand that you can discard, you actually can't block the attack, so you would just take it. So once again, it just felt like these random effects coming out of nowhere. It was just like, oh, I'm losing, here's some shit that I made up, so now that I can win, right? But obviously, having to deal with that in rank initially was kind of like, what the fuck? As I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way. I was trying to see if I can get the new SO support to work out, especially since Juan Mango was actually throwing another tournament this time around. This time it was actually a Swiss tournament, where once again you fought off against multiple different people in different rounds, and then you accumulate a couple of points, and whoever has the most points moves on to a winner's bracket. I spent so much time on stream, off stream, trying to figure out what deck I was going to bring to this tournament, and tweaking my deck to try and make it a little bit stronger. I took my original Pale Moon deck and I tried to make it stronger by removing the stands and instead replacing them with crits. And I think I messed around with a couple of the other cards that I had in the deck. And I did some weird thing for my Gold Paladin deck where I just threw in a bunch of random cards, seemingly random cards, and I played like 9 stand and 3 draw or something weird like that. A really weird combination. And I ended up going into the tournament with that. And it's not going to be any, no more tournament arc this time around, because this one was short and sweet. I just got completely destroyed. I won, I think, like maybe 2 games, which was pretty cool, but I did really bad. I placed, I think, like 28th out of like 40 people or something like that. So I didn't do very well this time around. This one hurt me even more. This one I took pretty hard, because I spent so much time building these decks, and I just hated these decks. Even after I built them, I thought they looked good, But even just going into it, like initially going into the tournament, I was like, oh man, I should change my deck. I don't like how this looks at all. And it was just, I was not having a good time with these decks. And I didn't like what I did to them at all. So that was a real big mistake. And I started getting really negative about it. I was just like, man, I thought maybe this was something that I could maybe be good at and like maybe really compete in. But I was like, nope, never mind. I just suck. Maybe I should just stop doing this. And, you know, all of that negativity started building up, especially, you know, all of my like frustration or like hatred or whatever against Glory Maelstrom, going ranked and losing the tournament and all the previous tournaments, all this kind of stuff. I think I actually took a small break from Vanguard and I actually went back to Duel Links. So that's how you know things are bad, whenever I go back to Duel Links. But, you know, I was just being really negative for no real good reason. You know, if you lose, it's not really that big of a deal, but I was just taking it really hard. After set 8, we got set 9, which is also a really impactful set, because it gave us the new mechanic in Break Ride, and also started the beginning, I believe, of the Link Joker era. But this set gave us a bunch of support for Narukami, Golds, Nova Grappler, and a brand new clan in Genesis. I really wanted to get the Narukami stuff. I hadn't really cared about Narukami before, but one of my favorite characters in the anime, Naoki, actually used Narukami, specifically the Eradicator cards that were coming out in this new set. Well, maybe I wasn't the biggest fan of Naoki, because there was actually this Naoki mega fan on Twitter, where wherever you would see a Vanguard post about Vanguard 0, you'd always see this guy comment like, hey, that's cool, but when does Naoki come into the game? No matter what the post was about. And you would always see it. It would always be the same gif of like Naoki putting on his glove. So much to the point that Pablo actually kept track of how many times this happened, and he made him like this nice little AMV where it was like a slideshow of all the times that he said that once the character was actually released. It was pretty nice. But as you can probably imagine, I didn't get any of the Eradicator stuff. And it really sucks, because Eradicators was actually a really, really good deck. Really, like, top tier deck. Really expensive deck as well, because there was a lot of triple rares that you had to get. That being, triple rare being the highest rarity in all of Vanguard 0. And wasn't too happy about that. Because there's no way I was going to be able to, you know, craft all of these cards, right? On top of that, as you also might have guessed, my luck with Misaki continues, because I didn't really get a lot of the stuff for Genesis that I wanted, because there was also a Misaki clan. Instead, what I got was actually a bunch of stuff for Liberators, which was kind of odd. Liberators, they were kind of okay. They were also pretty expensive, because they had a lot of triple rares. They were an okay deck, nowhere near as good as Eradicator at the moment. So I kind of felt disappointed in that. I played a little bit of Liberators, since I got so many of them. I also got a bunch of the other triple rares, and it always just felt like the game was calling out to me to use Liberators, much like it did, I felt like, in set 2 and 3, where it just started giving me all this Pale Moon stuff that I just started getting extra, and I was like, alright, fine, I'll play Pale Moon. And you know, I listened to the game and I loved it. But this time around, I kind of ignored the game, and I was like, no, this deck is kind of whatever. Not really liking it too much, and I just kind of put it to the side. And for the most part, I was considering just taking a break from 0. I was starting to get a little bit burnt out. Clan events weren't great. No new events were really coming out. And we had a couple of new little things, but it wasn't really anything too groundbreaking. Having to face up against Eradicators, not being able to get Eradicators on my own was kind of disappointing. And I was still kind of miffed about the tournaments and stuff that I lost, because I was being a big whiny baby. But then set 10 dropped. This was actually been called the Waifu set, because it is a set that actually revolves around units that are all female units and used by female Vanguard players from the anime. And I was really into this. I loved a lot of these decks. I ended up playing a lot of Jewel Knights and Angel Feather this time around, because they got support in this. The other clans that got support were Oracle Think Tank and Bermuda Triangle. Jewel Knights were really fun. They actually invigorated my love for the game a little bit better, because they kind of helped me, they kind of carried me through it, in that I was able to use like Gansot and Blaster Blade, which was a nice combo, because you can, you know, easily put blast Gansalot back into the deck, get a heal back in deck, get Blaster Blade who lets you retired. You can get a bunch of crits, so it was a pretty nice, pretty easy to use deck that worked out pretty well. So it got me a pretty good amount of wins, but I also managed to have a lot of materials left over for Angel Feathers, because I just kept getting a lot of the same cards that kept getting me a bunch of the materials for Angel Feathers. So I managed to craft Celestials for Angel Feathers as well, and I really loved that deck too. I had a lot of fun during this time. This was also around Christmas, which was around my birthday, so I had a little bit more free time, a little bit more extra money. So I actually remember spending a bunch of money on my birthday for the split gacha they had, because, you know, there was 4 clans, and what they did is that they did this special gacha that had 2 of the clans, so you had a better chance of getting, you know, all the cards for those specific 2 clans rather than having to pull for all 4. And the 2 of them conveniently were the other side of that set, which was Oracle Think Tank and Bermuda Triangle, who I didn't really have anything for, so I was like, sure, I'll hit this. My luck for Misaki is completely horrible. I'm gonna force it this time. So I hit the gacha a lot. I got a bunch of the Oracle Think Tank cards for the summer round, which was for the Magus cards, and I tried using them, and I was super hyped for this card specifically. I didn't really care too much about Celestials or Jewel Knights. I thought they would be kind of cool. I was like, oh, if I pull it, that'd be great, but you know, my luck, I might not. And I kind of really looked at Magus. I was like, oh man, this looks really cool. Maybe I can finally play Oracle Think Tank. No. Didn't actually like the deck at all, to be honest. I played it a couple times. I just did not have any fun and immediately dropped it. Maybe it was a good thing that, you know, I had such bad luck with Misaki, because maybe I just don't like her clans as much. And after that, set 11 came around. You know, I actually don't even remember what's in this set, but I remember that there was Genesis support again, and I felt, alright, let me give this a shot, because this wave of Genesis support was actually pretty cool. They did a lot of like soul charging, a lot of stuff manipulating the soul, and it was similar to Pale Moon, so I thought it was really sick. So I went and I waited specifically for the clan gacha for Genesis, and I just got all of the Genesis stuff. And even though after I got it, I felt kind of bittersweet about it, because I like waited and waited for this clan rate to come up, and I didn't even like get anything else for that set. I just kept waiting, and you know, I used all of my stuff at that point, got all the cards, and I don't know, I was kind of like, I guess I'm happy about this now. And I went, I built a deck, and I started using it, and once again, I was just not too excited about it. I don't know what it was. Again, I think it was just meant to be that I shouldn't be playing stuff that Misaki uses. There was a good reason the gacha wasn't giving it to me, but I just didn't want to listen. Set 12 was another massive set because we got support for Shadow Paladins, who haven't got support for so long. But now they got Revengers, which is immediately known as, you know, one of the fan favorite decks that a lot of people were clamoring to play. There were a lot of people that early on would set their tag in game to, you know, Revengers waiting room, because they were just waiting for this set to drop so they can play this deck. It was so hyped that the game was actually overloaded with people trying to play the game. That actually they had to do maintenance, and it was always really sluggish and like slow that first day when the set dropped. I remember, like, I was just like, whoa, Revengers are a big deal, right? On top of that, there was also the new clan in Link Joker, which was a sort of like evil clan that played a lot of importance in that section of the anime. So it's a pretty big set. I didn't really care too much for Avengers or Link Joker, because they're kind of like super popular, and I always try to like not play the popular stuff, because I always want to be cool and unique and stand out and not use stuff that other people are using. Which means, of course, I got all the Revengers stuff without even trying. Revengers and Link Joker took up the majority of the rank ladder. It was like 90% both of those clans, and then 50% of the time of that 90 was Revengers. Because, you know, I don't blame them. The deck's really good, generates a bunch of advantage, does about everything. Can draw, retire, attack, everything, right? So at this point, I tried to play a deck that sort of focused on keeping my opponent at 3 damage, so they can't make use of their abilities once they hit 4 damage, you know, Break Right or Limit Break, and then just swinging him for a bunch of damage. It similar to a deck that I tried playing before called the Blau Ethics that I was super hyped up for in set 9, but I actually got the deck and found the deck to be really frustrating, because what you basically need to do is stall out until you meet specific conditions. Those conditions are your opponent is at 3 damage, so they can't really do too much to you. You are at least at 4 damage. You have your Break Ride, as well as multiple cards in your hand that you can play at that point and have to discard so that you can just go in and basically win. So it was kind of this really high rolling deck where either you won or you lost. And it was more or less a coin flip on whether or not you got what you needed or you just fell flat on your face. There was a new version of the deck that basically did the same thing that came out on this set that I started playing with, and man, I was so frustrated playing this because it was just every single time I would draw a card. If it wasn't what I needed, I'm just like, oh no, I'm gonna lose. If I didn't hit the triggers as I was supposed to, if I didn't get the cards exactly how I was, it was just way too much. I dropped the deck, the original version of the deck, Blau Ethics, even though I really wanted to play it for the same reason, just because I can't take every ranked game having this kind of stress. And then now this deck, the same thing. So again, I got a little bit burnt out. But rather than like going off into my doing the Duel links again, since I've been streaming, I kind of just, you know, voiced my frustrations on stream, I remember, and we took a look at the Liberator deck that I had. Got some new supported Liberators for this set as well, and we kind of built a fun Liberator deck that just, similar to my previous Gold Paladin deck, has 9 crits and just, you know, smacks my opponent to the face with 9 crits, and I just had a lot of fun with that deck. And it made me sort of feel that sense of community that I had before that I kind of lost out on because I was just focusing on, like, you know, ranking and getting super high in rank, not really like talking to anyone or like trying to really do too much in terms of like tournaments or anything like that. Just like, oh, I gotta rank up, all this kind of stuff. So it kind of like set me back. I was like, oh man, this is kind of more what Vanguard is about, not just trying to get top 100 or anything like that. But then after that, we got set 13 that I was really looking forward to because it gives us support for Pale Moon. I've spent pretty much since the set was announced in Japan, the Japanese servers, and since it's about 3 months before, since that time I've spent it just grinding up to get Pale Moon materials just so I can get all the cards on day 1, which of course I ended up getting, and I ended up playing the deck, and I love that deck so much. Once again, it just ticks all the boxes for me. I love the aesthetic. It actually works really well, and I actually enjoy playing it, which is amazing. I ended up getting a couple of the other things, but all I cared about was Pale Moon, and you know, I was actually having a pretty good time with the game now, because this deck, it made me feel like even if I lost, it wasn't like I lost because I sucked or something like that. It was kind of like, you know what, whatever, because I was still having a good time. And it felt like no matter what, I can take on whatever deck came my way. I kind of felt that way with Angel Feather initially, because you know, you're able to do so much, you draw so much, you heal so much, all this kind of stuff, get a lot of power. But then I just had a lot of bad stints in ranked, and I just kind of stopped using the deck. But then I actually, after a long time, actually ended up joining another tournament. This time around, Pablo again invited me to a tournament where it was another tag tournament, but it was only pairs, so there were just teams of 2. Basically, you just had to do 2 out of 3, and as soon as you lose, you drop out. Right? Pablo tore that tournament up. Because we made it to, I think, like the semifinals, and it was just him doing everything. I didn't have to do anything until the semifinals. It was just him absolutely destroying the competition. It was awesome to see. But then he actually ended up losing in the semifinals to an Angel Feathers player. I came in with my Pale Moon deck, and I actually managed to win very narrowly. And I just had to win the next match against the Shadow Paladins player, and then we would proceed to the finals, or have a shot at the finals there. And I was doing my thing, doing all my moves, I was getting in the groove, I was doing a great job, and it got to the point where I was just about to win. Attacks were about to hit, going for game, but then my opponent checked a damage trigger, which boosted their Vanguard, and I did not get any triggers. So I wasn't actually able to swing for game, unfortunately, and my opponent was able to wipe me out next turn, and we lost, which sucked. This one kind of hurt a little bit just because, Pablo put in all this tear, and then I come in and I immediately lose, so it kind of made me feel like I wasted all his work. But, somehow, I don't know where it happened, but I kind of grew up at this point where it was like, so what? It's not really that big of a deal that I lost, so I didn't spend all this time crying and wallowing in my despair like I did before. I was kind of like, yeah, well, I lost. I did the best I could do. Paulo did great. That's all that matters. And I had fun. And, it was nice that I was able to just move on and finally grow up from that and learn from the past. But finally we reached set 14. And I've been talking on for I think an hour, more or less. But this is where we are now. We're pretty much reached the current time of Vanguard 0 being a year old. Set 14 was awesome because it dropped, again, another clan or support for stuff that I was really looking forward to. In Noble Grappler again. I've kind of been playing a bunch of Noble Grappler because I've been playing Pale Moon and stuff. But now we got Blouse, which look freaking awesome aesthetic-wise. So I've been playing those a lot this month. And that's basically it. That's been my experience with Vanguard 0 in the last year. This was sort of an anecdotal take on it. I remember Different Fight did a video about the same premise, going over the year of Vanguard, but his was more of talking over the state of the game and things that he liked, things that he didn't like, etc. And I wanted to do something similar to that, but I was like, well, he kind of touched on everything that I really wanted to touch on. I didn't really want to sit here and regurgitate the same things. So I wanted to kind of talk about what was special to me about Vanguard, and it was just sort of the experience that I went through it, first time playing Vanguard, period, all the things that I felt, the sense of community, all this kind of stuff. Especially considering that, Vanguard 0 has been really special for me. It came out specifically in 2020, which, as we all know, was during a global pandemic, which freaking sucked. It sucked specifically for me as someone with a chronic disease that has a lowered immune system. So on top of there being a global pandemic, everybody be stuck at home, watching everything, the world going to shit that year, my health was actually not doing too great in around March. So everything was kind of culminating to be, as everyone felt it, the worst year of all time. But thankfully, immediately after that, in April, Vanguard 0 released. And as you can tell from the hour that I just been blapping on, rather than worrying about my health issues and the world going to shit, I just spent it having a good time with the community, playing some card games. And well, pandemic's doing a little bit better. Health is doing remotely better. So I'm CurlyHairedVanguard, and this has been my year with Vanguard 0.